I knew that he was coming home from Iraq with PTSD because of some of the stories that he shared with me.
Mm-hmm.
And when we had our meeting with all of the wives before they returned, I brought it up and I said, I know that he's coming home and he's going to be struggling. What should I do? And a lot of the wives were almost upset with me, and they said, you don't know that, he's not home yet. But there was one wife who agreed and understood, and she said, I believe you. And she was actually a Marine veteran as well. So she had that personal experience, and we're still friends today, actually. And so Tom returned home, and basically, I listened to what they had told me to do, which was to give him some time to come home and decompress, and then after, some time, if things aren't getting better, then go ahead and reach out to his command. So I talked to him about it, and he told me who in his command that he felt like I should be reaching out to. We got him help.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. So we're coming to you live from Jacksonville, Florida. As you can see, sunny and windy Jacksonville, Florida, the site of, yet again, another one of Americans for Prosperity's America's 250th celebrations. And we're doing it today on a pier with the backdrop of the USS Orlick. The USS Orlick served in, from, I think it was the 40s to the 80s. But one of the things it did is that it protected pilots in the Vietnam War. So it would protect the planes that were taken off and protecting, service members. And our guest today, Katie Bagosy, is a CVA engagement director, Concerned Veterans for America, for those of you who haven't tuned in all the time. She's one of our engagement directors, but what's brought her to this work of serving members of the military and veterans' families is a tragic story of her own that she lived through an experience. And it's going to talk to us today about how she has gotten involved and what she's doing as her career now to help men and women who are struggling after serving in the military. So, Katie, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, well, I want to hear about your story and your husband's story, and they're intertwined here. That's what brought you to work for Concerned Veterans for America, to be dealing with veterans issues and especially mental health issues. So we start off like how you and your husband met and kind of where it went from there.
Yeah, so we actually met the summer after our junior and senior years of high school, and I was working with one of his friends, and we would all just hang out together, and we started off as friends, and I was actually trying to set him up with some of my friends and coworkers, and within a couple of months, I really started to like him and found out that he liked me, and we dated on and off for about 4.5 years, and then we got married. So. Yeah, we got married in May of 2005.
Nice. And was he already in the military?
He was not, no. And so he actually joined a couple of years after he graduated high school, and he was a third generation Marine. Okay. And so he, that was something that he ended up doing, following in his father and his grandfather's footsteps. And he was proud to be a Marine.
Nice. So he joins up. I imagine did he deploy pretty quickly after you guys got married?
So his first deployment was very quickly after we got married, but it was over to Okinawa. So his first war deployment, our son was about 9 months old, and he was in Iraq from, I think, September of 2006 to April of 2007. And he came home with a traumatic brain injury and PTSD. Mm-hmm. And so that started the rest of our journey. And then in 2009, he ended up going to Afghanistan as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Even with the brain injury?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. It's very common.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. What, so when he came back and you started to see issues, and I think you'd say that he recognized you had PTSD and you guys saw some evidence of that. How was that realization? What did that look like?
So I knew that he was coming home from Iraq with PTSD because of some of the stories that he shared with me. Mm-hmm. And when we had our meeting with all of the wives before they returned, I brought it up and I said, I know that he's coming home and he's going to be struggling. What should I do? And a lot of the wives were almost upset with me, and they said, you don't know that, he's not home yet. But there was one wife who agreed and understood. And she said, I believe you. And she was actually a Marine veteran as well. So she had that personal experience. And we're still friends today, actually. And so Tom returned home. And basically, I listened to what they had told me to do, which was to give him some time to come home and decompress. And then after, some time, if things aren't getting better, then go ahead and reach out to his command. So I talked to him about it, and he told me who in his command that he felt like I should be reaching out to. And we got him help. He was getting counseling. He was on medication. But he wasn't always consistent with it because he didn't like the way that it made him feel. And then in addition to that, he wanted to go over from 10th Marines to MARSOC. And his command at the 10th Marine said, hey, listen, like if you want to go over there, we need to see that you can be off of your meds for 2 months. And so he stopped taking them. He went over to MARSOC, and then he just never got back on them. At least not until after he came back from Afghanistan.
When PTSD manifests itself, and when you have a loved one with it, what are some of the signs? What does it look like?
I mean, I think it's different for everybody, right? But Tom came home, and I said from the beginning that the man that I married died in Iraq, and I didn't know the man who came home in his place.
Oh, wow.
Because he was such a different person. He was cold, he was mean, he was disconnected. And so he would get very angry very easily. There were things even when he was driving and he would have, almost a panic attack because he'd see something in the road and, and it would trigger a memory or different things.
Sure.
And so, at some point, though, it was just where the day-to-day it was hard for him. He started drinking more, and just looking for other ways to cope. And so, when he came home from Afghanistan, though, he was a different person again. And
Really?
the way that I describe it is that it was like he was human again, but he didn't know how to handle it. And so the emotions that he had were so overwhelming that he struggled in a very different way. And I think that was probably even harder for him than coming home from Iraq and being a little disconnected.
Wow, yeah. So he comes home from Afghanistan. Did he start up with the treatment again?
So he took a couple of weeks of leave because he came home right before Thanksgiving. And in January, he did start up with treatment because we talked about it and he knew that he needed it. And they put him on gabapentin, and it spiraled him downward very quickly. And I remember one day he looked at me, he was sitting at the computer, and he's like, Katie, it's not my fault. And I was like, what are you talking about? What's not your fault? He's like, it's the medicine. It's making me crazy. It's not me. And there was
isn't that the opposite of what it's supposed to do?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But a lot of times they're just throwing pills and, playing Russian roulette and let's see what helps, and they're spending 10, 15 minutes with these guys and not actually listening to them and trying to solve the root problem. And it's all just about masking and medicating. And, unfortunately, that was not a medicine that helped him. And he felt that sense of relief. And then he was looking and trying to get help, but there was a lot that was going on. And so there had been a situation actually at his shop where they decided to take away his guns. And they ended up taking away his guns twice. And I knew that things were getting bad when he allowed me to talk to his command and to his doctors, because that's just something you don't do in the military, right?
Yeah.
You don't have your spouse or anybody in your family come in and speak on your behalf. And his command promised me that they were going to get him help. And they turned around and they told Tom that they thought that he was faking it and they wanted to fix him. And unfortunately, that did not help the situation. And so while they were telling me they were going to help him, what was happening was he was getting worse. And so I went with him to see his psychiatrist. And when we walked out of that office, Tom said to me, I told you he wouldn't listen to you. He doesn't care. All he cares about is his job. And so I ended up writing his doctor a letter. And I told him, how I felt about how that meeting went. And I said, if you're not the person to help my husband, then please make sure that he gets a different doctor. So Tom died on Monday, May 10th of 2010. And that Friday, May 15th, the referral came in for another doctor.
Oh.
Which is very, it's hard when you think about how close you were to getting this saving help that he needed,
Yeah. That's going to be enormously frustrating.
Yeah.
Take me through the day that he died. There were some events that occurred there that kind of led up to it. Can you kind of take us through that to the extent that you feel good about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it actually started the day before, and we really don't have time to get into all of it. But, he was pretty suicidal. And May 9th that year was Mother's Day. And so I got to the point where I told him, I was like, Tom, there's no way that I can stop you from doing this, is there? And he said, no. And I said, well, you can't do it today. You cannot do that to your mom. You need to at least wait until tomorrow. And he said, okay. And I knew that the next day he already had a meeting set up because of a prior incident, and he was going to be in the Deployment Health Center. And so that morning we woke up and I asked him, I said, you're already going to be there. Can I call your psychologist and talk to her? And he said, no, but you can call out in town and ask if there's any doctors that I can go and see. So I made some phone calls and they were like, he's a Marine. We can't see him.
Yeah.
And I said, we'll pay out of pocket. And they were like, no. And I did have one person say, if he wants to come here, then he needs to make the phone call.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew he wasn't going to do that. And so I had the decision to make. And I knew when he came home, no matter what I did, there was a 50-50 chance of him ending his life. And if I didn't do everything I could, then I would never be able to live with myself.
Right.
So I called his psychologist and I told her, I said, off the record, he has a gun and he is suicidal and he will do and say anything he can to get out of your office. And if he gets out, then he will kill himself. And she said, I believe you. I'm going to go down and see if he's still in the building. And we're going to get him the help that he needs. Next thing I know, I'm getting a phone call from him. And I couldn't understand, what he was saying at first, but it was something about a gun. And then he said, Katie, I love you and I don't think I'm ever going to see you again. And I yelled into the phone and I told him I loved him and I don't know if he heard me. And to this day, I don't know why I didn't call him back. I think I was afraid that he wouldn't answer. But I called his therapist and I said, what is going on? And she called me right back and she said, he's okay. He was secured. He's on his way to the hospital. They'll call you tomorrow. And I was like, what does that mean he's secured? And she's like, he's fine. He's okay. He's alive. He's safe. I was like, okay. So it didn't sit right with me. And I called my parents and his parents and I updated everybody. And both of my parents were like, you need to call the hospital and figure out what's going on. But I couldn't. I just couldn't do it. And I just had that, she told me that everything was okay. I have to just trust that. And I was a rule follower. They're going to call me. So several hours later, I had a knock at the door. And I looked out and I saw government plates. And I was like, oh, they must be here to ask me questions about how he had a weapon. Because they had taken his guns away twice. Like, why did he have a gun? So I went and I opened the door and I saw what uniforms they were wearing and that there was a Navy chaplain. And the first thing out of my mouth was, is he dead? And they asked if I was his wife and I said yes. And I just fell on the ground because I knew what was coming out of their mouths next. And they said, on behalf of a grateful nation, we regret to inform you. Oh. And I didn't understand. And the chaplain sat down with me and I was like, I don't understand what happened. She told me he was okay. I said, did he do it or did they? And the chaplain said he didn't have the answers. He didn't know what happened and transpired, but he knew that Tom had been the one to end his life.
Sure.
And the next thing I did was I called my dad and I said, I need you to come down. And he drove down to to take care of us because I was not okay.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, what a tragic day. And there's so much that led up to it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's always hindsight, and I know that's what's kind of animated what you've decided to do with your life.
Mm-hmm.
So how have you taken what led up to that, what happened on that day, and now kind of made it your life's work? Tell me immediately afterwards, and then what you've been doing to make a difference.
Well, it's funny. I don't feel like I've done anything, really. I don't feel like I've done enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I will ever feel that I've done enough.
Sure.
And I've always been an advocate for mental health since he died. There's a lot of stigma around suicide, and I've just completely rejected it. And I've shared our story. And one thing that is comforting to me is that I've had people either tell me directly or through somebody else that they're alive today because of Tom and our story.
Wow. That's fabulous.
Yeah. And yet it's, like I said, it'll never be enough. So I've done a lot of different things, but I would say that where I'm at right now, because I'm a firm believer that everybody has a story that somebody else needs to hear.
Yeah.
And I'm working on a project where I'm trying to tell veterans' stories, and especially their VA stories, because as we know, our VA is very broken.
Fails a lot of veterans.
It does. It absolutely does. And I've watched what happens when somebody's actually seeking help and not getting it. Mm-hmm. And so for me, if I can then go ahead and showcase other people's stories and let them either tell it directly, and some of them don't want to be on camera. Mm-hmm. So tell me your story and then I'll share it. Because I think that the more people are out there and aware of what's happening, then the more that we can move the needle forward. So that's one of the things I'm doing. And it ties into my work with CVA, because we're working on the Veterans Access Act, which would give more community care and better standards and more access to veterans for their health care.
What have you found in your work to be one of the best ways for you to connect with family members or veterans to try to help save their lives? Because we did recently a Memorial Day episode, and we were talking to one of your colleagues, in fact, and you highlighted that between the veteran community and active duty, 50 service members take their own life every day. That is mind-blowing, and just it's beyond tragic. So you're working to help hopefully bend down that curve. What have you found to be effective, and what's kind of your go-to to try to help others?
I think it really just depends on the situation. And mm-hmm. honestly, there isn't a blanket statement that, one size fits all for everybody. But I think listening to people's stories, letting them share and validating that their voice matters and that their service matters is always helpful. Giving them an opportunity and a platform. And that's one of the things I think that we get to do with CVA is to elevate their voices so that people can hear them, especially when it comes to lawmakers, right?
Yeah.
And then there are times where people have come to me and they're like, what do I do in this situation? And I don't always have the answer, but because of my community and network, I usually can just reach out to somebody and be like, okay, this person's going through this right now. Who has a resource for them? And that's one of the things too, is that, just being able to collaborate with other organizations and people who have the answers, because different people have different needs. And I think that collaboration it's going to be a game changer.
Yeah. So what you're saying is one of the keys, which makes sense, is that help folks realize that they're not alone, that they're valuable, and that there's others that want to help them and kind of join them in this fight or in this walk of life. It is really, it's scary to me. I have a bunch of boys, teenagers and a few 20s and stuff. And, as a kid, I always wanted to go in the military. I didn't, but, I've always thought about, like, for them, and even my girls too, there's so many good things about it, but this aspect of it terrifies me mm-hmm. when it comes to kids. Or someone that I love. It totally terrifies me. It's probably the number one thing, more so than them being harmed in combat or something. It's the thing that I don't understand and that I don't know that I could protect them from. I could be a resource, I guess, at some point, but if they were to go down that road and choose that career, I'd be enormously proud of them, but I'd be really scared for them. So I don't know, what would you say to somebody who's thinking about how, a loved one or a kid wants to go into the military?
Well, I think that there's a mental health crisis that extends way beyond the military, and our young people are suffering in so many ways already. So, I think what we need to do is be proactive and reactive. And I don't think that our government and our military has done a good job of that. We train them to go to war. We don't train them to come home. And some of that is going to start with the stigma and erasing that beyond the military as well, right? We just need to be able to openly have conversations about mental health and understanding that everybody goes through something at some point in time. So then, you're talking about, hey, your fear, right? It's more about the mental health piece than it is to have something happen in combat.
Right.
Well, when you think about how many have died because of suicide versus at combat, I mean, that's a valid concern. So I think it's going to take all of us to sit around at tables and talk and collaborate and come up with plans and then actually take action. And there's a lot of talk, but there's not as much action. And I always say that people are either mission-minded or they're ego-minded. So there's a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to nonprofits.
Yeah.
And we can't be doing that. You have to understand how would I word that? Where is your comparative advantage? And then looking at other organizations and saying, what's their comparative advantage? How do we come together? But when you're talking about somebody who is thinking about going into the service, I think that that's one of those things that you just have to be able to prepare yourself, but you need to have a good support system and you need to be open about it. You have to have that community. I think one of the reasons that I knew that my husband was coming home with PTSD was because he did share things with me that I think a lot of spouses didn't share with their wives.
Sure.
And so just having that community and building that, and really it's going to come down to our government, our military, they have to be more proactive instead of reactive because, Tom died 16 years ago and there hasn't been a whole lot that's been effective.
Yeah.
And so what are we doing? And I will say this too. There are a lot of widows who have some answers because we've seen what happens. There's a lot of patterns and similarities and we get ignored, and we should have a seat at the table with the veterans, with the caregivers, and with the surviving family members. Because when you think about it, well, what went wrong? The ones who are still here, they're still fighting, and we're so glad that they are, and I hope that they all choose to stay. But maybe we have some insight from being widows or the families who watched our loved ones struggle and they didn't make it. So I think that that's another aspect that should be explored more.
Yeah, well, it seems like you're an essential part of the community that's around that person. And when I hear you saying that community is kind of, and that support system is essential to getting better outcomes and kind of trying to reduce this epidemic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing that, your story and Tom's story with us. I hope that your work is so fruitful going forward, just expands and is so much more and more effective. We're so proud that you're with us with Concerned Veterans for America, that you're with us today. And, I really hope that you and then generally all of us can make a real difference for our men and women who've served.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and to share our story as well.
Thanks. Well, folks, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, like and follow us on social media, on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take them for granted. Go out there and defend liberty and freedom. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.